So we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but I want to start with continuing this conversation about depth, and really the key to a deep roster in fantasy is identifying sleepers. And last week we touched on some sleepers, but really we were talking about some breakout players. Sleepers are guys that really maybe the so far the mock drafts or the fantasy community, they're sleeping on some guys that we're overlooking, guys that you can get really late in drafts that we believe can exceed those expectations and kind of the draft capital that you really don't have to spend on them, which is great. And so give us a sleeper that you've identified and you're trying to target late in drafts.
Yeah. So for me, the most obvious sleeper for this upcoming season is Rico Dowdle. And we'll talk about, crazy names a little bit later. But I think if Rico Dowdle just wasn't named Rico Dowdle, he would be going much higher in drafts and he have like a more exciting, cooler name. But the easiest thing to look at for Rico Dowdle is the number one running back in a top NFL offense finishes as a top 24 fantasy option 76% of the time, which the Dallas Cowboys have been the number one offense in the NFL 2 of the last 3 years from a scoring standpoint. And Rico Dowdle right now is projected to be the starter. I know they brought in Ezekiel Elliott, but throughout training camp, everyone's been saying Rico Dowdle looks like the best back, which is easy to believe because Ezekiel Elliott was only 3.5 yards per carry last year and outside the top 30 in almost every single efficiency stat that matters for running backs. And even though Rico Dowdle didn't get a ton of touches last year, something that I found super interesting was he actually was 9th in the NFL in yards created per touch, which is a stat that measures, outside of how well the O-line's blocking for you or you catch a wide open pass, are you able to make the next guy miss and gain extra yards after that? And he was top 10 in that, being a backup running back. That was a stat that, James Cook excelled in a few years ago. And that's why, it was so obvious why he had a great backup or breakout season as the guy last year. I think Rico Dowdle, he's going super late in drafts like RB45. There's a very slim chance to me that he does not finish as a top 24 running back in fantasy football this year. You look at some of the breakouts that have gone late in drafts and had huge explosive years like Raheem Mostert, Gus Edwards, David Montgomery, Jamal Williams. Like all of those guys did it because they were a top running back in a top NFL offense and were just a product of being on a great team, which Rico Dowdle certainly has going for him.
I'm in with you, and I'm not a big Ezekiel Elliott guy, so I'm siding with Rico, and I was on his bandwagon last year, and so we'll continue that. So I'm right there with you. Here are a couple other sleepers that I want to add to my depth, and so doing mock drafts, these are guys that I'm getting late. I'll start with a couple wide receivers. I think people are sleeping on Michael Wilson, Arizona Cardinals wide receiver. Marvin Harrison is exciting. Let's go. It's going to be fun. But if we think that he's going to come in and get some attention, well, you got to have a number 2 guy. And in Arizona, if they're going to start passing it more and Kyler Murray's coming back, so if you're going to buy that narrative, don't forget about Michael Wilson, who had a nice rookie season, showed flashes of being really productive, and then we sort of forgot about him. And I know Trey McBride is there, and he's going to have a nice season at tight end, but if this offense lifts a little bit, Michael Wilson he's still a young guy. He's coming into year number 2, and he may even have a little bit of an advantage early in the season. We'll see how quickly. Harrison's unbelievable. So they're drafting him in the second round, expecting big things right away, but just don't overlook and sleep on Michael Wilson. Also, Jahan Dotson, talked about him on a recent episode. I think he's a late sleeper. I'm seeing him rise a little bit, though. People are starting to remember, oh, yeah, this guy was pretty good. Yeah, he's got some talent. Last year, it didn't work out with Sam Howell, but don't forget and sleep on Jahan Dotson. Also, the situation in Cleveland, both of us were kind of hesitant about Cleveland this year, deservingly so. Everybody always sleeps on Amari Cooper, but Jerome Ford, who was really good filling in for Nick Chubb last year, should be the guy to start the season, and people are forgetting about him and sleeping on him. And a very concerning thing for D'Onta Foreman today, he got injured. Apparently, he's going to be okay. He's coming back to practice kind of as we speak, I guess. But scary, they got helicopter, all that kind of thing. But even with D'Onta Foreman, who I also like, Ford has been there. And so he's another guy, man, you're sleeping on. And then I'll give you one more. I'm just kind of running through some guys here. Marshawn Lloyd with the Packers. And so I'm not a big Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs. Yep.
Josh Jacobs. I'm not a big Josh Jacobs. I don't even know his name. No, Josh Jacobs. So last year I was all in on Zamir White, which I'm now excited about because he's going to be the starter. He's the clear starter in Las Vegas. They ship Jacobs out of town. The Packers have, I think, they're going to be disappointed. That's my opinion. So I'm going Marshawn Lloyd as a rookie running back, as a late round sleeper as well. So anyone else you want to throw into the mix as some guys to add depth to your roster?
Yeah. So when looking at what makes like a great sleeper, obviously there's some guys that come to mind. Like Raheem Mostert last year is like the perfect sleeper because he finishes like the number one running back behind Christian McCaffrey, despite going in like round 13 or 14. But I looked over the last 5 years. Who are some more guys like that were drafted later than round 10, ended up finishing as a top 30 player at their position? So, you could be starting this guy pretty much every single week. And it's really interesting what I found because it kind of like bucks the trend of what we normally think about with late round sleepers or breakouts. We're looking for young guys who's the 5th round rookie that might come in like Puka Nacua and light it up. But typically, the guys that actually come in and have success are veterans that people are overlooking. And the reason they are taken later is because people are more excited about the rookies. When you look at guys like Adam Thielen and Cole Beasley, who have constantly outperformed their ADP because they're the old guys and everyone's excited about the rookie coming in who might take their job, but the rookie never actually takes their job. So some guys like that this year, Curtis Samuel in Buffalo. I know everyone's excited about, the young wide receivers that they have there come up to replace Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid. But historically speaking, Curtis Samuel's probably the best bet to actually finish as the wide receiver 1 in that offense. Another thing with the New England Patriots, I know people are excited about Demario Douglas and Jalen Polk, but they signed KJ Osborne in the offseason, someone who is going completely overlooked, but right now is number 1 on the Patriots depth chart and who has been a productive wide receiver in Minnesota over the last few years. And then the final guy I'll mention as this, old vet wide receiver, DJ Chark coming into the Los Angeles Rams. I like Ladd McConkey a lot, obviously, but he's a guy that's been in the slot, and we haven't really seen him be a dominant college wide receiver. He was more of a gadget guy in college. Quentin Johnson, I don't really believe in, but those are 2 young, hyped guys. DJ Chark, they brought in as a free agent and he is the starting wide receiver right now. He's running in 2 wide receiver sets in practice, but is not being looked at all in fantasy. And it kind of makes sense why these vets actually end up being good breakout picks. Because if you were to take DJ Chark and put him on Alabama last year, he would look a lot similar to Marvin Harrison as like a 6'4", 4'4" speed, 215 pounds. Like there's a reason why the 5th round rookies don't always break out. It's because the guys who have been in the league for 6-7 years are just better and they get the shot. When there's an opening at the number 1 spot, it usually goes to the vet.
It's interesting. And to continue that, like I said, with the second year wide receivers, let's not overlook these guys because you've got, even in Carolina, we're getting some hype for Jonathan Mingo. And he's another sleeper that if this hype continues. Don't forget about Josh Downs with the Indianapolis Colts. He had some really good performances. Now, he played better with Gardner Minshew. I'll give you that. But let's see Anthony Richardson out there. Let's see him healthy for a full season. And Josh Downs, who, it took him a few weeks to get going. But once he got out there, he was impressive. So he's coming into the second year. So even in Indy, there's some excitement for Adonai Mitchell. Well, fine. He might be good as the season goes on, but let's not overlook and sleep on Josh Downs either. So another name to consider. So, and you're talking about Marvin Harrison on Alabama or Ohio State?
Well, he was on Ohio State. I was saying if you put DJ Chark on Alabama, he would look a lot like Marvin. Obviously, we both have the same team that just wouldn't work out. Gotcha. Too many wide receivers, too many mouths to feed. I don't even know who the Ohio State quarterback was last year after CJ Stroud.
I've already forgotten his name. But yeah, Harrison was unbelievable. But no, I think you bring up a really good point about these overlooked veteran guys, because last year I was in on the Adam Thielen bandwagon, right? And so the Darius Slayton a couple years ago with the New York Giants, like some of those guys, and you get them really late in drafts. That's the key. Thielen, you had to probably get middle of the draft last year. But anyway, those are the kind of guys. So they're sleepers. We want you to consider them. We want you to have a deep roster. Don't forget about those guys. And yes, there is a conversation to be had about going to get some rookies and some rolling the dice on a couple rookies. It's fun. It's part of fantasy. And yes, a lot of rookie breakouts happen. So again, back to building a roster and having depth, mix it up. Don't go all rookies. Don't go all veterans. Don't go all risky guys. Get some steady guys. Get a couple risks. Buy into a couple of the players that are hyped and potential breakouts. Yes, but don't load them up all with potential breakouts. Get guys that have been consistent. Don't forget about those guys either. So we have to be reminded of this. We're your fantasy coach here on Fantasy Football Fellowship. Got to coach you up and remind you of some of these things. I got to remind myself. It's these are some of the fundamentals that we start hearing some of these training camp, some of the news, and we start swaying one way or the other, and we have to remind ourselves of some of the principles to stick to.